One of my fundamental beliefs is if a woman truly wants to be sexually fulfilled, she needs to take the focus off of orgasm and put it onto her sensuality, to allow herself to feel her entire body, not just her clit. I've said the next statement at least a bazillion times and will keep saying it until it gets through. Sensuality is where your toe curling sex lives. The problem is, most women don't know what that looks like or are afraid to express her very powerful sensual self. In this podcast, Danielle Epstein will walk us through how to tap into your sensuality from an interesting perspective, balancing your masculine and feminine energy, and how you can become more conscious about what causes you to feel turned on and aroused. That sounds really good to me. Hi, I'm Dr. Trina Reed, sexologist, and welcome to the Pursuit of Pleasure podcast, where we do a deep dive into what makes women in long-term relationships excited to have sex. Thank you for subscribing to my YouTube channel. And if you want to have a deep, soul-quenching, mind-blowing sex life, please check out my free masterclass workbook and video. So the thing is, sensuality is elusive. Sometimes we have it and sometimes we don't. But wouldn't it be great if you could pull out your sensuality whenever you wanted to, on command? Well, according to Danielle, you can. She says, we like to think that attraction and great relationships are all about luck, sparks, and fate, that love just magically finds you someday. But the truth? There isn't some great mystery. Pull back the curtain and you will find that the mystery is really just rhythm and mechanics. And that means you can learn it, master it, and create the love you crave. Here's another easy way to tap into your sensuality: mindfulness meditation. In fact, a growing body of research coming out of the Sexuality Health Laboratory at the University of British Columbia shows the effectiveness of mindfulness on women's sexual pleasure. So please check out the mindfulness meditation website and get a free 7-day trial, which I'll tell you more about at the end of this video. When I asked Danielle about how masculine and feminine energy is tied to pleasure and sensuality, she said masculinity and femininity is one of the biggest but not talked about components of intimacy. That it doesn't necessarily mean sexual intimacy or even between romantic partners, but rather in a sense of feeling connected and aligned with whatever person you're interacting with. When two people share great levels of intimacy, it naturally lends to pleasure and sensuality. Danielle Epstein is a passionate advocate for understanding the psychology and neuroscience behind human connection. Her life's mission is to empower people to explore and deepen their sexuality, intimacy, and relationships through science-based insights and relatable truths about human behavior. Danielle helps individuals uncover profound truths about themselves, the opposite gender, and the keys to cultivating extraordinary intimacy. As the founder and CEO of The Intimate Instinct, Danielle leads a vibrant community. She has a women's discussion group to foster meaningful conversations, self-discovery, and personal growth. Danielle and I had a very interesting discussion about sensuality, and I'm really excited for you to dive into this. Thank you, Danielle, for doing this podcast. This is something that is very near and dear to my heart, and that is talking about women's sensuality as opposed to her sexuality. And so we're going to do a deep dive into how the masculine, feminine energies relate to women, and I suppose men's too, the sensual part of a couple's lovemaking. So thank you for being here.
Happy to be here. So excited to talk about it.
Yeah, I'm excited too. I'm excited to learn from you. So the first question is, with the masculine and feminine dynamic, do you believe women's sensuality has been distorted?
Yes, I
Oh,
do.
okay.
And yeah, I'll just come straight out
Woo.
with it. There's a couple of reasons why that is. Masculinity and femininity is really misunderstood, in my opinion, and really falsely embodied, if that makes sense. The way that masculinity and femininity work is through polarity. And if you can think of it almost on a spectrum, when masculine energy is over here and feminine energy is over here, there's really strong polarity between these two forces, and each of them brings out the best in the other. They're not labels, they're not stereotypes, they're not gender constructs, they're just energies, they're just ways of being. And what naturally happens, you can either use this in a really positive direction and it creates a cascade of really positive domino effects, or it can become a really negative one and that gets really messy. It's an easy cycle to fall into and a hard one to break out of. And what happens when it's in this positive spiral is the masculinity calls out the feminine energy, which is really shy and slow to come out. And the feminine energy softens the masculine. And when both of those two things happen, they converge and they meet where sensuality is. The feminine helps the masculine move more into his body because the masculine lives really up here. And the masculine helps the feminine move more into her body by making her feel safe and protected. Turns off her brain and her alarm system, her, having to look out for herself, right? And both of them are able to move to a place of sensuality. When that polarity doesn't exist, what ends up happening is that neither of them move to this place. Now, what's happening in society is we've been repeatedly told femininity is oppressive, it's suppressed, it's weak, it's passive. We've been, again, going back to all these myths and misconceptions, we've been fed all of these lies that femininity is not good and masculinity is good. Yet at the same time, and I'm going to go off on a tangent, but at the same time, we also say masculinity is bad. So we've depolarized as a society, right? Like everybody's kind of moved to this place where femininity is weak, masculinity is toxic, so neither are good. And we've completely depolarized, which means that sensuality is really hard to step into. At the same time, all these gender roles and gender expectations, and a lot of what we learn about lovemaking comes from the porn industry. And that industry teaches us to perform, right? Like that industry teaches us it's okay to fake your pleasure, or at least the intensity of your pleasure, and to artificially exaggerate it. So what's happening is that because we're not in our feminine, we're not in our masculine, and we're not, pulling on each other the right way, no one's in this space of authentic sensuality. We're instead in this place of like performance and, or we just don't do it at all, right? And sex lives are just dropping off a cliff. So that's sort of what's happening. And so, yes, I do believe it's become distorted.
That's a really answer. And I feel like I really liked your comment about how both feminine and masculine energies are seen as bad now. And so, like, where
Mm-hmm.
does that leave anybody? Like,
Where does that leave us?
like,
Exactly.
like, what do we do now?
Exactly.
So, do you believe women are afraid to express her sensuality? And if yes, why is that?
I wouldn't say afraid. I would say hungry for, like desperate. Like they really want to. I think women are really tired of not living in alignment with their bodies, not feeling like themselves. We've seen there's a correlation. We've seen a rate of increase in things like infertility, PCOS, endometriosis. Like we've seen an increase in physiological symptoms, and we also see a decline in femininity. And maybe there's a correlation there, right? I think women are really hungry to move back into their bodies and they really want to be that way. However, moving into your body requires a lot of safety to do so because your brain is what keeps you alive, right? Not your body. So if you feel emotionally, mentally, physically unsafe in any way, you're going to be up here, which is in this like more masculine space rather than in your body. So I wouldn't say that women are afraid to move into their sensuality. It's more they don't know how to. They really want to. They don't know how to, and they don't feel safe enough to do so. And I think that's more the challenge that's happening in the world right now.
Yeah, and something that I talk about a lot is research shows that when the longer a woman is in a relationship, the more she experiences what is called a delayed sexual response, which is it's
Hmm.
going to take her mind some time to catch up with her arousal. So, as you say, she's in her mind, and the longer she's been in the relationship, the longer it's going to take for her to move into her body. And I don't know if that's her feeling safe or, but I feel like maybe there's a correlation there between making sure she's feeling safe within this interaction and moving into her body.
Yeah, I mean, my thoughts on that is that what typically happens in a long-term relationship is that polarity slowly goes away. When a relationship begins, polarity is really strong. That's what makes you feel this like, I've got to have this person now sort of hunger, right? Like it gives you this attraction, this desire that's just untamable. You're waiting by your phone, like for messages from that person, right? Because polarity is really good. And over time in long-term relationships, you slowly lose polarity. And there's so many reasons why this could happen, which is what I work with my clients on, is why that happens and how to not make that, how to stop that process. But in long-term relationships, you slowly leave your feminine energy behind and you move more into, I want to say masculine, but it's really more wounded feminine energy, which looks really masculine on the surface. Wounded feminine energy is I have to feminine energy. Not It's not the same as divine feminine energy, which is I want to. I have to take out the garbage because my husband won't. I have to tidy up the house because my husband won't. I have to go work because, even though I don't want to, because I want to raise my babies, but I have to go work because the economy is expensive, right? Like it's I have to energy. And that I have to energy is a survival mechanism. And what that does in order to survive in a more masculine world, that survival mechanism makes you more masculine. Now, it's not the same as true divine masculine energy, which is like, I want to do this thing. It's forced. I have to do this thing. So over time, women move more and more and more into the space of I have to, which means they move more into their brain because they're moving more into a survival mode. And as they do that, they're leaving their bodies, they're losing connection with their bodies. There's correlation with drop in sex life satisfaction, drop in attraction with your partner, increase in physiological issues, a lot of them being related to your feminine reproductive health system and like your pelvic region, right? Where we have a lot of our feminine energy. So there's a lot of patterns and parallels between that. So many so that I would be like, it seems more than just coincidence to
Yeah,
me.
so something I also talk about is having obligation sex, and the entire time you're having obligation sex, you're resenting it, and the resentment just
Absolutely.
builds and builds, and people conflate this obligation and resentment with sex, and sex is just a neutral thing. It's neither good nor
Yes.
bad, it's just neutral, but we're conflating it with this ideology of, all the negative feelings that we have going into the sex because it's not something that we're completely feeling or into or want or don't know how to access our body, and we're just going through the motions. And if we can just tap into our sensuality, I think a lot of that would go away.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I believe that resentment is one of the worst things that can happen to a relationship, romantic or otherwise. Resentment to me is sort of like a cancer. Once it's there, everything just sort of feeds it and grows it, and it's really hard to get rid of. Any little oh, I just don't like the way he said that thing, even though it would maybe normally not bother you. If there's already some resentment there, then this just kind of feeds the fire. So resentment is one of the worst things that you can do or let build in your relationships. And sexuality is one of the most vulnerable personal things about you. So if you're having obligation sex, which is one of the most personal, intimate things you can do, and it's under obligation, which is fueling resentment, it really creates a negative cycle. And even not obligation sex, but faking orgasms is the same sort of thing. So I'd be very, very cautionary to not fall into that. The one thing that I think is really interesting is there's two different kinds of bonding hormones that exist. There's something called vasopressin and there's something called oxytocin. Men make a lot more vasopressin. They actually need like 2 to 3 times more touch than women to make the same amount of oxytocin. So they make a lot more vasopressin. Women naturally make a lot more oxytocin. And these two hormones bond you to somebody in very different ways. Vasopressin, you bond by going through something stressful with somebody and by getting to the other side of it. And then you feel like, oh, I can trust this person. Like this is somebody who I can do things with. And then it leads to oxytocin bonding where you can be soft and nurturing and warm and cuddly with that person. Oxytocin bonding, when you do that first, that means I have to feel safe and comfortable with you first. I have to feel close to you. Then I will allow myself to go through something stressful with you. And what's interesting is that a lot of men vasopressin bond first, which makes sense because they make more vasopressin. And a lot of women oxytocin bond first, which again makes sense because they make more oxytocin. And if you get to the concept of desire, we have spontaneous desire and responsive desire, right? I'm sure you know all about that. What's interesting is that a lot of men experience spontaneous desire and a lot of women experience responsive desire. And to me, it doesn't seem far-fetched to draw a conclusion between women tend to oxytocin bond first and women tend to experience more responsive desire. So obligation sex tends to be more spontaneous, tends to be more vasopressin, tends to be more male-centric. And so all of those things sort of seem like they go together in my mind.
I'm sure they're all intertwined. And, something I talk about is, you can use your responsive desire to get you into your arousal. And so it's
Absolutely.
about putting your body into motion. But I also believe that if you know that the majority of women, let's say 99.9% of women experience responsive desire, then let's make it work for us. Let's add
Yes.
sensuality in. Just
Yeah.
put some of that sensuality into that delayed. So if you're delayed and you need some response, you're putting your body into motion, you are intentionally bringing sensuality into this mix, and
Mhm.
perhaps and you can speak to this a lot better than I can. This is where the real feminine and masculine energies, because if she's bringing in her sensuality and he's got his vasprosin, as you say, like all of a sudden you mix these two things, and it's just going to be mind blowing. So then my question to you is, how does the masculine and feminine help to create a deeper sense of sensuality, sex, and intimacy for men and for women?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, as we talked a little bit about before, there's polarity that exists between these two things, right? Masculine energy is one that is very strong, stable, unshakable. I want you to almost think of it, there's a couple of metaphors that I love to use: a flag and a flagpole, or a riverbed and a river. A flagpole is the masculine. The riverbed, the ground beneath the river, that's the masculine. And why, right? The flagpole is unshakable, it's sturdy, it's grounded. It provides a platform for the femininity, which is the flag, to fly and to thrive. And the riverbed, what does it do? It contains the water, it directs the water, it holds the water. Without the riverbed, the water would just be, a swamp, it would be a puddle, it would be directionless. And without the water, the riverbed is just this empty, like nothing, right? And same thing, a flag without a flagpole is just a pile of fabric. So together, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Together, masculinity and femininity create something bigger than just both energies alone. So masculine energy is one of strength, support, and I don't mean physical strength. I mean confident, sturdy, directed, consistent. So masculine energy is strong and stable, predictable. Feminine energy is chaotic, but in all these beautiful ways. It's unpredictable and it adds this liveliness, this warmth to things. And when both of those energies are working the right way and they're doing what they're supposed to do, it creates so much positive, sexy tension between the two of them. And magic happens. So the feminine, what you need to know about the feminine is that it's very shy. It's very, very vulnerable. It lives very deep within all of us and only comes out when it feels extremely safe to do so. Emotionally safe, without fear of being judged or shamed or criticized. Mentally safe, that it's going to be, respected, that the other person is going to meet you with presence and, awareness. And physically safe, right? It won't come out if you're running from a bear or somebody's chasing you, right? So what the masculine does is makes the feminine feel safe, which calls her out. And when she comes out of her cave, she softens him. And that's what leads to sensuality. I like to say that sensuality is intentionality. It takes a lot of purpose, planning, intentionality, time to be sensual, to transition into your body. And it takes time to transition into your body. And that entire process is only possible when you feel safe. And that's what comes from. That's the result of this energy working correctly.
And just to add to what you're saying, so I've asked many women, tell me a time about your best sex. And
Mm-hmm.
inevitably, she says something to the effect of, I was so juiced up and into my body, and, I was in the zone and I was fully in my sensuality and arousal. And that's when I had my best sex. I think we're focusing on the wrong thing. We're focusing on consistently having an orgasm when I feel like we should be
Yes.
focusing on consistently bringing a woman into her sensual body. And that's where you're going to have mind blowing sex.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how often I have to say this, how often I'm just like, I've been beating this drum for about 25 years. And, I
Yeah.
hope one day it's going to catch on, but I promise you, when you take the focus off of just stimulating her clit and move into stimulating her entire body and her sensuality
Mm-hmm.
and getting all these energies going, she's going to be an animal. She's going to be like crazy. Like, you think porn is great? Just wait till you see her in this
Yeah. And
state. Like,
I
this is
would
going to
add to
like
that.
blow your little mind off.
Totally. And I would add to that, like, it's my very firm belief that when you're in your feminine energy, when you're correctly embodying and living that energy, and your partner is correctly embodying and living in their masculine energy, it's so much easier to transition into your body, right? And it's the saying that I love, that like foreplay starts as soon as the last sexual interaction stops, right? Like, it's not just the 3 minutes before that you're making out. Like, no,
Wah, wah,
fore
wah.
yeah, that's not it, right?
That's not
Foreplay
it.
starts the minute the last thing ends. It's all of these micro interactions you're having. And that's where, maybe you're not sensual in those moments, but you certainly can be in your masculine and feminine energy, right? Like planning date nights the right way, communicating throughout the day the right way, appreciating each other, supporting one another. Those are all this energy working correctly or incorrectly. And that leads to foreplay that unlocks the ability to be sensual. And so, sensuality is actually quite difficult to achieve if you're not mentally and emotionally in the right space for it, right? Like, it's not purely about being physical. You have to want in your soul to be in your body. And it's these energies that sort of unlock the desire to even, and the ability to even make that transition.
Well, this is a great segue, because the next thing I wanted to ask you is, what needs to happen for both sides to bring back the balance and create a greater union between the masculine and feminine. And I want to specifically say, for those couples who have been together for 10, 15, 20 years, where their sex
Mm-hmm.
habits have been established and they want to do something different, but they don't know how. So let's say a couple's super keen to try this. Like, what could they do?
That's a great question with a lot of possible answers. So that's what's good. I want to give people hope that it is possible. Um, First and foremost, you need to learn about yourself. You need to learn about your habits, your patterns, your desires, your values, what needs of yours are not being met, how you communicate, how you make somebody else feel in your space. And so the more you can build self awareness, the better. And I would say it's not just self awareness, but also emotional intelligence and body literacy, understanding how your body is working, how you're feeling certain emotions, and where you feel those emotions in your body. The next thing I would say is you have to learn. I'm a woman. I have to learn about women as a species and men as a species. We operate on different hormones, well, really the same hormones, just different levels and in totally different rhythms. Men operate on a 24-hour hormonal clock. Every day they experience the same thing, which is why they are so, their energy that they mostly have as masculine energy is so consistent and stable and predictable. Women, we operate on a 28-day clock as well as a 24-hour clock. Things like our sleep and digestion work on 24 hours, but things like our mood and our mental clarity and our focus and our energy levels operate on 28 days. So the more you can learn about how your gender works and how the hormones that you run on have shaped your brain, and with your brain being shaped the way it is, what it means for things like your communication, your libido, your memory, right? Because we have very different memory and communication styles as men and women. So the more you can learn about how your own gender operates, and then the more you can learn about how the other gender operates, I like to call this gender intelligence, it helps all of a sudden. It's like, oh, I shouldn't communicate it this way because it's just not going to land with a man the way that it would land with me as a woman if somebody communicated it to me this way. So if I instead communicate it this way, I have a much higher chance of him understanding what I'm trying to say because that's how his brain works, right? So the more knowledge is power, the more knowledge you can gain around how a male brain and a female brain actually works, the easier it will be to act in a way that will be received well. The next thing I would say is I hate this gender war that we have going on. Like, this gender war is such a shame to me. And like, I'm so embarrassed that I live at a time when we have such a bad gender war. I think it's really, really horrible. The feminist movement helped lift women up, and we still have a way to go. And it was very much needed and, so powerful. Where I disagree with it is we did not need to tear men down in order to lift women up. And that's exactly what we did. All over social media, you see people saying like, I would choose the bear, or the 4B movement. I'm never getting married. I'm not talking to men, or, oh, there's no good men left in the world, right? Like, we see women putting men down all the time on social media. And this creates a self-reinforcing loop. Men are now afraid to be men or don't know how to be men. They're confused because if they're too forward, they're going to be predatory and you're going to perceive them as a threat. And if they're too passive, you don't like them and you just shit all over them. So men don't know how to be men anymore. And so they retreat. They have like no interest in being with women. But then it only proves the women's point that there's no good men left in the world because the men are like, what's the purpose of even trying? Because the women are just going to criticize.
So
And
if I can just interject for just 1 second, I think I agree with you, and I do think there are definitely segments on either side where there's
yeah,
toxic men and toxic women, but I do feel like my generation is raising really good boys. Like I'm raising two teenage boys, and I feel like other people or parents are raising good children that are looking at this differently, and I don't think they'll have the same hang up. So this is like 10 years down the road, but I know that that's what it is right now for sure. But I do think we
yeah.
saw this problem and we're trying to change it. But for right now, this is where we are.
Yeah. And, the thing is that cultural changes happen very, very, very slowly. So even though we might be raising our kids now to not be this way, it's going to take another 20, 30 years until they're old enough to really experience relationships themselves, right? And the people who have learned these patterns, if they're able to unlearn it, that's going to take, 10, 20, 30 years. So cultural change comes on very slowly and goes, changes and recorrects very slowly. And so it's my prediction that for the next 30, 40 years, there's going to be a lot of lingering downstream effects from this gender war. And so that's why I encourage everybody, like, do your personal part in putting an end to it. Don't perpetuate it. Because you believe what you tell yourself. If you tell yourself there's no good men left in the world and you're putting that out there, that's the energy that's going to find you again, which is not the energy you want. The next thing I would say is, particularly for the men out there who typically are the ones that embody more masculine energy than not, healthy masculine energy is all about being reliable, supportive, predictable, consistent. So follow through on what you say you're going to do, step up, take initiative, do the things you say you will, and do them often. And the more you can lean into your healthy masculine energy, if you're around the right kind of people, the more it's going to be recognized and appreciated and received well. And the same thing for women. So many of us women live in this wounded feminine space of, like, I have to be hyper independent. I have to be a boss babe. I have to make my own money. I have to rely on just myself because I can't rely on anybody else. We are in a huge state of not trusting as a whole, gender. And so the best way to start changing that is A, make the decision to trust and to be vulnerable, which is scary. And the men be working on being consistent and reliable and predictable, which will just aid in us being able to trust you more. Opening dialogue around all of this, I think, is exceptionally important. That's what I do with my group at the Intimate Instinct. Just talking about it, talking about the gender differences on, a brain level, a psychology level, talking about the patterns we're seeing in the world, talking about asking the questions that you're afraid to ask in a safe space, pushing yourself to explore new horizons. Open up the dialogue is really important. And last but not least, I would probably say surround yourself with the right kind of people.
Yeah, I think I really believe that women feel a lot more brave when they're with other women. And, I feel like your groups can really help raise women up and help women feel brave. But also, I like what you said about having a safe place to have these tricky conversations. Like you probably like you wouldn't go on social media and start talking about the feminine and masculine because you'd be eviscerated. But like, so where can you talk about this and get some good answers and learn about this in a way that's going to help you have a healthy relationship. And I just want to add in, so this is just a little bit of trivia that's kind of maybe off the point because we were talking about this like 5 minutes ago, but the female version of a misogynist is a misandrist. So there are many misandrists on the internet, and I've been attacked by several misandrist trolls, and it's not pleasant. Maybe you are the safe place for listeners to talk about this. And speaking of that, how can listeners find out more about you?
Yeah, so my company is The Intimate Instinct, and it's quite simple. The website, all the social media channels are all the same thing. So theintimateinstinct.com and at The Intimate Instinct. On there, I have a couple of free resources. One of them is the biggest top 5 myths about masculine and feminine energy, of which there's a lot. There's way more than 5, but there's 5 big ones. And hopefully that plants a seed for you to start like reprogramming and recalibrating your belief around this thing. And then another resource on there is the top 10 signs that you are more than likely out of touch with your feminine energy. And so it helps you see where you're at right now and if this is, something that could help you. So they can go there and check that out. And then I host webinars quite often. So whatever webinars I have coming up will also be on there as well.
I think people should definitely check this out. Like it's a fascinating topic, and I know that we just touched the surface. We didn't even
Yeah.
get into the
Oh, we
weeds.
only touched the surface. Trust me when I tell you, there's so much to it.
Well, speaking of which, Danielle and I did another podcast. So if this is
Yes.
interesting you, please go into the description and find the other podcast because we talked
Hmm.
about sexuality specifically and how this all relates, and it was a fascinating conversation. So please
Yeah, we got
go.
a bit more in detail about
Yeah.
masculinity and
Well,
femininity. Yeah.
we yeah, but I really liked how we touched on like lots of like you got a lot of juicy good information,
Yeah.
things that you can really sink your teeth into. So thank you so much for joining us
My pleasure.
yeah, and please make sure to check out Danielle's website. I have, and it's like a fountain of information. So thank you, and best of luck with your groups.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Wow, that was really informative and insightful. Please make sure to check out Danielle's website, The Intimate Instinct, to see how you can join her women's discussion group. And FYI, Danielle and I did 2 podcasts. So, the first podcast, we discussed how do you get the spark back in your relationship. And if you're interested in this discussion, the links will be in the discussion notes. You can always double up and combine masculine and feminine energies with mindfulness meditation because you deserve to start your sensuality journey right this moment. Mindfulness meditation offers a 7-day free trial, and there's a ton of value that you can access. There's a library of over 2,000 guided meditations, gratitude practices, breathing exercises, podcasts, music playlists, sleep content, and so much more. You have nothing to lose and your sexual mojo to gain, which to me seems like a no-brainer. So please check out my mindfulness meditation video and affiliate link in the description. Bottom line, women should feel empowered in their relationships to ask for her sensual needs to be met by balancing out your couple energies, which takes the two of you figuring it out together. I'd love to hear your thoughts and comments about how balancing masculine and feminine energy helped your sensuality. Please check out my free masterclass workbook and video. Links will be in the description. And thank you for liking and subscribing to my YouTube channel. Your support helps grow women's sexual pleasure. Because even though your sex life will never be perfect, you can create a sex life that is perfect for you. Because you deserve a deep, soul-quenching, mind-blowing sex life.